The end of the year is looking great for sure for PSVR2, but let's not forget we've had a good year so far for the headset because we've had a load of releases that have been just phenomenal. Today, we're going to be going through those releases and seeing where they stack up against each other. Of course, there'll be some games that I missed that maybe you love that I won't cover today, but on a whole, these are the ones that I feel I've enjoyed the most this year, from the new to the not so new. Thank you for Fast Travel Games and CM Games for sponsoring this content. However, a little bit more about them later. Kicking us off, let's talk about a recent game. Metal Hellsinger has just dropped a brilliant Doom BPM inspired game where you slash your way through hell with fantastic weapons and movement mechanics that just feels right. If you're a fan of rock, you're really gonna love this one. I know I did, despite some little blurry edges on certain fire objects, but to be honest, that is such a small nitpick for such a fantastic game. So if you're a fan of the genre, you'll feel right at home with this one. Speaking of genres, there's one that hasn't really got too much love on PSVR2, that is the platformer genre. Luckily, on the same day as Metal Hellsinger, Max Mustard came around and fixed that right up. I'm not going to harp on too long about this one because you already know what it is if you've been around the channel at all so far this week, because we reviewed it and it's been in the upcoming Games for October video. This is just a fantastic platformer. It might not go above and beyond in reinventing the entire genre or anything, but it is incredibly solid and looks and plays great on the PSVR2. A game that really surprised me was Snow Scout this year as well. I've really loved this one. It's essentially you're opening a ski slope. You traverse around each of the lodges, testing out each of the runs and making sure they're fit for purpose and activating ski lifts, all while having a fairly one-sided conversation with a woman in a watchtower on the other side of the mountainous valley. It'll last you a couple of hours, and I really enjoyed those couple of hours, just getting to know the other person on the other side of that radio, finding out a little bit more about yourself, and doing a load of fun skiing, bird watching, and picking up litter around the mountains. A really relaxing game and one that gets you thinking. I'd recommend to anyone who wants those nature vibes on PSVR2. For a bit of a blast from the past, go and check out Arcade Paradise, a game that blew me away this year in terms of how addictive it is. I need to put more time into it. That's the thing with these games. I always get caught up in the next one and the next one for reviewing. This is one I do need to revisit again just in my own time to enjoy the hell out of it. You open up your own arcade at the back of a laundromat. In the day you do the laundry tasks, and at night you get to play on all the arcade machines and let other people who come in the day use them too. This will gain you money, which allows you to buy more arcade machines, open up new cabinets, and over time the arcade becomes the main attraction over the laundromat and the main moneymaker. It's a really satisfying gameplay loop and a much loved game for a reason, and the PSVR2 port is pretty damn good. And now we get on to the sponsored segment from Fast Travel Games and CM Games. But this sponsored segment isn't a normal one, and that's because we're talking about Into the Radius. That's right, this game deserves the spot on the list, sponsor or not, and if you played it, you really understand. It's a fantastic game on PC VR and Quest, and the PSVR2 version is right up there, if not beyond, with its great use of haptics, incredible visuals, and a choice between quality and fidelity mode, which we don't often see in VR. It's one of the most atmospheric games you can ask for on the headset, with some of the best gunplay and the most unnerving and tension-filled design that I've ever seen. If you're a fan of the Stalker-like games or more milsim-like games, you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't played Into the Radius. And to be honest, out of everything on this list, it probably is my highest rated title of this year so far. So sponsor or not, even though thank you CM Games and Fast Travel for sponsoring this segment, I would still be recommending this one to you guys because it is phenomenal, and now it's been out for a little while. All of you guys who've played it know that too. Compound as well landed on PSVR2 this year, and this retro roguelite has carved itself out a niche in the PSVR2 market. People have loved this one. It runs fantastically, one of the smoothest running games I've ever seen on the headset. It looks the part as well, and the gameplay is incredibly fun. Lots of guns to choose and a bunch of levels to blast your way through. The same can be said about Windlands 2, another game that runs fantastically this year, and the gameplay is incredibly addictive. I jumped into this with fellow creator Hippie Pickle to try out the multiplayer, which it also has, which is just a fantastic feature, and it's so fun to Spider-Man around with friends, taking on bosses and enemies with the game's signature grapple guns and bow and arrow. If you're a fan of exploration or Spider-Man, this is one for you. Sushi Ben is also one for you if you're a fan of manga or anime. Clearly inspired by those two mediums, Sushi Ben puts you in a coastal Japanese town where you essentially have to defend a local sushi restaurant from loan sharks who are trying to take it over. This includes doing tasks around the village, engaging in dialogue options, and taking on mini games as you go. This is just an absolutely charming game that I loved from start to finish, and if you haven't played Sushi Ben or at least checked it out, you can now do either in VR, and I'd recommend on PSVR2, or in the flat, because I think the flat version is coming out fairly soon. Another game that has a more dystopian charm, but charm nonetheless to it, is Umurangi Generation. This solo developer brought their game into VR where you essentially take photographs of things, you head around different maps, getting shots of certain subjects, unlocking different lenses, doing a bit of post-processing, and selling your shots at the end of the day. Quite an enticing little premise, and the game really doesn't outstay its welcome. It isn't the longest thing in the world, but I really enjoyed traversing through its levels and taking some artistic shots. Speaking of shots, Big Shots is also on this list because this mech game is simply fantastic fun. Again, it might not last you the longest of times because this is a roguelike with a fair bit of replayability, but not as much as, say, Compound or Ancient Dungeon, but it does have co-op, which is really fun, and you can customize your mech to show off to your friends as you're blasting bugs with them in the maps. Gotta shout out OVRDARK, a do not open story as well, a game I didn't really have many expectations for going into it, but I really enjoyed it as it felt like a bit of a spin-off from the Resident Evil sort of gameplay style where you're figuring out puzzles and trying to avoid enemies and doing very scary encounters. I'm not a very big horror fan, or at least I used to be, but PSVR2 is slowly converting me, and it's thanks to games like this. One that needs no introduction is Legendary Tales. This game is just the RPG that so many people were waiting for, announced back in the February State of Play, I believe, out of nowhere. I wasn't that excited for it from the trailer, but boy was I wrong. This game is fantastic, both in up to 4-player co-op and in single player. If you want to immerse yourself in a dark fantasy world, this is the game for you. For all of you flight sim fans, it may look a little cartoony on the surface, but Ultrawings 2 has really found its footing on PSVR2 as well, with a mix of arcade and sim flight mechanics, meaning that you can go quite in depth if you want to, or you can keep it smooth and simple. With plenty of planes and maps to choose from, if you're either just flying around or engaging in dogfights or challenges, there's some fun to be had here no matter what. Gotta mention Bulletstorm as well, because Bulletstorm is a game that released a couple months ago and I was kind of scathing to it, but over the course of this year they've really patched it up, making it look good, play a lot smoother, and fixing a lot of the bugs, and even adding a horde mode to the game. Massive shout out to these devs, because even though the game didn't launch in the state that it should have, I'd happily recommend it now if you want to relive this PS3 classic on the PSVR2. After having an unintentional surprise launch, Breach has made its way over to PSVR2 this year as well, and this tactical shooter is nothing short of fantastic. I've done a couple videos on this game. It's basically Rainbow Six Siege, but in VR, which is exactly what a lot of people are asking for, and the player count shows that. Like most VR games, if you're in the middle of, say, a school day, you might not be able to find a match very quickly, but on the weekends and in the evenings, you definitely will. It's got quite an active pro scene as well, as it's a very competitive game, and there's just something awesome about doing the Rainbow Six style rappel system and throwing grenades and breaching in virtual reality. Finally, I've got to shout out Madison VR, a game that absolutely terrified me. Possibly the scariest PSVR2 game of all time, to be honest, and one that I desperately need to finish because my first impressions video was from the first couple of hours and was terrifying enough, but maybe I'll finish it this Halloween season, who knows. Anyway, those are my top picks for the best games of this year so far, but as we all know, we've got a massive lineup coming at the end of the year, so we'll see how the PSVR2 awards stack up at the end of this year. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to CM Games and Fast Travel Games for sponsoring today's video. Thank you to our patrons and YouTube members, Luke Bentley, Phil Irving, Hazit Mirza, Ace Gamer, Hippie Pickle, Jin007, The License to Chill, Sun WTF, Fat Controllers, The Game Cat, Andrew Ehrenreich, Jason Parker, Lamar Hall, Jordy Bandsma, Lemon64K, Outcast VR, Prophecy777, Gundy, and Salvador. If you want to join the Patreon or YouTube membership, those are all in the description below, of course, and I'll see you all in the next one.